It's Uncovered. It's Wednesday. I'm Anthony Davis, and he is Ron Filipkowski, the editor of the MidasTouch.com website and former federal prosecutor and a whole bunch of other things, right? I think your list is probably longer than my list, but that's not the point.
Can't keep a job.
Yeah. I mean, I remember once for a job saying I could ride a horse, and I couldn't. Let's talk about the big news that's happening. We've got a lot to get through today. As you know, this is the show where we kind of uncover far-right propaganda across the U.S., stuff that isn't covered by the mainstream media, who I have to say, on several subjects at the moment, I don't know if you've noticed this, Ron, but especially on the war between Hamas and Israel, the coverage has been terrible in my view. You know, I just think they don't really know what they're talking about. I even heard them refer to, you know, the Palestinian nation is fighting against the Israeli nation. I was like, which school did you go to? Anyway, we'll come to that later. But
they're definitely conflating the parties. Yes.
Yeah, they just don't really kind of understand maybe the history. I don't know, but it's like there is a desire to create a kind of, you know, a very traditional drama, two-horse race type thing. And as we know, they're doing that with this election. They're doing it normalizing Donald Trump and his extremist behavior. And, you know, the media let us down in 2016, as you know, 2020, potentially. And here we are again leading into an election year. And they still seem not to have learned. Maybe there's a financial incentive just to keep playing the game. Who knows? So we have a speaker race going on as we speak. Steve Scalise is out front. Just kind of bring us up to date where we're at with that. We'll talk about who's endorsed him, but he's still several votes short of a win, isn't he?
Yeah, so we can talk about this live right now, up to date, and then 5 minutes from now it'll be different because things are literally changing so fast. But yeah, just how this unfolded is just wild. So Chip Roy started out with the vote on Chip Roy's motion, which made a lot of sense strategically. And what he was trying to do is avoid a floor fight and avoid going through what they went through back in January, because I think he reads the room very well as far as the American people do not want to see another spectacle like that with all the stuff we have going on, the fact that we haven't had a speaker for a week. And so what his motion would have said was, we don't leave this room until enough votes to confirm the speaker. He has all the votes. Whoever the nominee has all the votes. We don't leave this room until we have that commitment. And so I thought that made a hell of a lot of sense. But that was shot down. They didn't agree to that because Scalise didn't want that. Because Scalise knew he had enough votes to get out of that room as the nominee. And he didn't want to gamble on having a long, protracted battle. So that gets shot down. Scalise ends up narrowly defeating Jordan. The interesting part about that, of course, is that Trump endorsed Jordan, and Jordan loses.
And let's not forget that Trump was potentially a candidate himself. And this morning it was announced that the GOP has rejected Donald Trump as a potential speaker candidate.
Yeah, I don't think that was ever serious, but yeah, that was
even a publicity stunt, but it's still not good publicity in my view.
Right. So now the real drama comes in, which is, you know, Scalise leaves the room with 113 votes, which is not even close to what he needs to become speaker. So then all eyes are on like the people who didn't vote for him. What are they going to do? And I had a feeling that Jim Jordan was going to fall in line, which he did. I even knew Matt Gaetz was going to fall in line because he already said that before in an interview that if Scalise is the nominee, he'll support him. But the problem is there's a good 7 or 8 already that have come out and said, I'm not voting for Scalise. So
Marjorie Taylor Greene,
right
Lauren
there,
Boebert, the extremists.
Yep. So right there, he doesn't have the votes because you also have the problem of Corey Mills, who would support Scalise, is in Israel. He flew to Israel. He's an ex-Marine. I speak to him from time to time. He's a Republican representative from Florida, and he went to Israel to help rescue Americans. He's actually doing a really good job over there. I think he's rescued something like 32 of them already. But he's obviously not here to vote either. So Yeah, I think Scalise's got real problems. So they were supposed to vote at 3:00 today, and they canceled it because they knew they didn't have the votes.
And it took McCarthy 15 rounds of voting to get elected himself.
Yeah.
They don't want to repeat that, do they? They don't want to get into a situation where there are multiple votes, because it means that they don't have the full support of the House and there is less confidence in the Speaker.
Yeah. So they postponed it to tomorrow. So now tonight is going to be crazy because, there's going to be all kinds of phone calls being made, social media posts. The other funny part was Adam Kinzinger's post, which I thought was brilliant. I don't know if he did this on purpose, but he basically came out and said, Scalise is the right guy to get Ukraine funding for Ukraine. And of course, I put that out because I wanted all of the, Scalise opponents to see it. And I wanted them to all see that Kinzinger is backing Scalise because of Ukraine aid. And of course, that's what happened. They all kind of went, that's getting around now, that Kinzinger post, and it's creating some problems for Scalise.
Scalise was asked by the media, it might have been last night, if he acknowledged and accepted that Joe Biden was the legitimate winner of the 2020 election. And he did not give a straight answer. Is he an election denier? Is he saying it because he doesn't want to upset Donald Trump, who obviously he needs on side? What's the story behind that? And what are the... I mean, it's very frustrating, isn't it? Because to have a speaker who gets elected, and ultimately I think Scalise probably will clinch it, but to have an election denier as Speaker of the House is not healthy for U.S. politics, for anybody.
Yeah, but no one can get elected speaker without saying what he said. I mean, if he came out and said, no, the election wasn't stolen, he wouldn't even be in this position right now. He would not have gotten the nomination. So I think he knows the election was legit, but he has to say that to have any chance whatsoever. But it's also caused people like Ken Buck, who's a moderate Republican somewhat, to say, well, I'm not voting for him then. I'm not going to support anyone who says the election was stolen. So he lost at least one vote with that, but had he not said that, he would have lost 50 more.
For people who don't know, just tell us who he is, like what his history is, what his politics is, and is he, in your view, a good candidate for Speaker of the House?
I mean, he's basically McCarthy. That's why I don't really understand this, is because you replace McCarthy with Scalise. Ideologically, they're both, I wouldn't say he's super far right, but he's pretty far right. He's very conservative, from Louisiana. People will remember he was the one who was shot in the congressional baseball game by the extremists there who opened fire on the game, and he almost died, so he survived that. He's also got cancer. Interestingly enough, that's what Green used as her excuse. Now, I will note that Green tweeted her opposition to Scalise 5 minutes after the Kinzinger post about Ukraine. I don't know if that led to what Green said, but Green said, Scalise has cancer right now, is undergoing cancer treatment, so she doesn't think he's up to the job. So she's not going to vote for him because he has cancer. It's just classic Marge Green,
Yeah. I'm not even going to talk about that. It's just too weird. Let's talk about George Santos, because he is he's a representative of Queens and that kind of area, and more information has been coming out, more indictments suggesting now that he's been stealing credit card details of contributors and then sending himself $8,000 to his personal bank account. And no, it was actually more than that. It was like $11,000. And he pretended that he had $500,000 in order to kind of get the nomination in the first place from the GOP. But actually, he only had $8,000 in his bank. The guy is not just a kind of, it's not just identity fraud. I mean, multiple names, multiple characters, multiple faces. But he is also a scammer. He is a scammer. He is stealing credit card details and spending that money for his own personal use, allegedly. Now, if the indictments are true, the fact that this guy is still sitting around Congress is just terrifying to me, because, anybody else would have been suspended pending the report. But ultimately, they need him for votes, don't they?
Yeah. So people might ask, why would somebody claim that they had $500,000 of their own money in their campaign account when they in fact did not?
Yeah.
Why would somebody do that?
And why did no one check?
Yeah, well, but what's the purpose? What's the point of putting that out there? The point is that if you've been involved in campaigns, especially Republican campaigns, we have this thing that I used to call the aura of inevitability, which is most Republican donors and endorsers, businessmen, people who want something in exchange for their contribution, which is a lot of big donors.
Yeah.
They want the main criteria they're looking for is not ideology. It's not personality. They want to back the winner. That's all they care about. Who is going to win? I want to be on that team.
Yeah.
So they're looking for the candidate who has that aura of inevitability that they are going to win. So when somebody like Santos has that kind of cash, an endorser or another big donor will go, "Oh, this is the guy. He's going to win. He's got the most money." So that causes other people to get in. So that's why he did that. But the other interesting thing is, there's a movement afoot by the New York Republican delegation to oust Santos, and there's a reason for that. The reason for that is because, surprisingly, I believe it's 4 Republicans were elected in Congress in New York after the redistricting, and I think 3 of the 4, at least, of those districts were carried by Biden. Those people are all very worried about hanging on to their seats. The last thing they want to do is be associated with Santos, but he's there. And so they're moving now to expel him right now. They're bringing forward a motion to expel him from Congress after the latest indictment. And Santos has already thrown out a lifeline to Scalise, basically saying, "Hey, if you want my vote, you're going to protect me from these guys."
So he posted yesterday about supporting Jim Jordan, didn't he, on social media? And he says, "Jim Jordan has my endorsement for House Speaker," and then posted a little picture of himself, kind of Congress photograph. Then, of course, Jim Jordan's out of the picture. So he sends this letter, which has now been published. Basically, it's a groveling letter, isn't it? And it's leverage, as you just described. Keep me, don't chuck me out, and I'm with you, Scalise. The bigger problem here is how this looks, because corruption, as we know, is rife in politics. But has it ever been as explicit as credit card fraud?
I mean, 23 felonies. This would normally be just an automatic expulsion, suspension at the very least, censor, not being able to vote at the very least. But this is a different Republican Party where pretty much anything goes. I think, had the Republicans had a 20-25 seat majority, Santos might have already been expelled, possibly. But they need every single vote. Scalise needs every single vote. And this guy, Santos, is a con man, and he knows how to leverage people. That's what con men do. They look for somebody's weakness and they try to exploit it. And that's what he's doing now. He went to Jordan thinking Jordan was probably going to win because he had Trump support. That didn't pan out. Now he didn't come out and say, "Okay, now I'm going to support Scalise." He said, "Well, I might support you if you protect me."
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because, Trump is also a con man, right? Trump conned his way into the White House with the support of the Kremlin, as we know now, and various other means. But they're kind of the same but different, aren't they? They're 2 very interesting characters for people who are into the kind of psychology of, and also because I think the narcissism goes with the con man thing, doesn't it? And with George Santos, or whatever his real name is, he has just denied everything at every turn. There was one moment where he said, "Oh yes, I made mistakes," talking about his resume and stuff. But now his excuse earlier was that I was in a meeting and I didn't have my phone on, so I don't know about these indictments, right? Like claiming, A, they always have their phones on in these meetings, and B, to pretend that you don't even know because you haven't checked social media is just a joke, right?
Yeah, although it's possible he didn't know because they were confiscating their phones when they went into that meeting because they were trying to prevent people from leaking. So who knows whether that's, I mean, they were taking away people's phones like it was 7th grade.
Such is the trust within the Republican Party. Right. Let's talk about Matt Gaetz, of course, because, he was the one that started this whole thing, ousting Kevin McCarthy. Tell me about Senator Mullen, because we have a clip of Matt Gaetz being trashed by him. What's the background on this?
Yeah, well, this is basically them Cawthorning Matt Gaetz, and I think it worked. This is, when I say Cawthorn, to rewind, when Madison Cawthorn made his ill-advised comments during a podcast where he talked about cocaine orgies in the Republican conference, they all turned on him and ousted him. I mean, they all cut off all his funding, primaried him, trashed him in the media.
Yeah.
And now
the truth hurts, Ron. That's why. The truth is a painful thing to handle.
And Gaetz has more skeletons in his closet than Cawthorn. So, yeah, when Gaetz ousted McCarthy, some of McCarthy's friends were looking to get revenge. And some of them came out and said, look, we know all about your shady past and all the crazy things you've done in the past. So, we could start spilling the tea on some of this stuff if you don't quit acting up. And I honestly think that's why Gaetz is behaving this week, and why he's going to back Scalise is because I think he's begged for mercy. He's done. He's done fighting these guys, because these guys struck back pretty viciously. So Markwayne Mullin was an incoming freshman at the same time as Gaetz. They were in the same freshman class going through freshman orientation. Since that time, Mullin has gotten elected to the Senate, so he's no longer in the House. But this is basically just Mullin letting Gaetz know, hey, if you keep up this nonsense, we're going to keep dribbling out these stories of your sordid past. The first story he gave to Manu Raju before this clip was, he said Gaetz used to brag about snorting Viagra so he could stay up all night and have sex all night. So that was the clip the day before this one. And then this was the subsequent clip where he talks about Kristi Noem and naked pictures.
Honestly, there was no colleagues that came out and defended him, because quite frankly, the stuff that he would show on the floor and the stuff he would brag about on the floor before he was married, we probably thought, well, that's reasonable, and we would always have to walk away from him. And so this individual that you have here, I don't think what he's done is something to be expelled, but this is something that his constituents back in Florida should make a hard look at. I mean, there was many times that he would go out on news programs in the evening, and he would tell me personally, hey, I've got to go sell my constituent catheters, because all he was doing was selling himself, and evidently his constituent base is an older base, and that he thought that was funny. To me, that's not funny. You take your job and make it serious, do what's right by it, and serve. This isn't an opportunity for you just to have an opportunity to promote yourself, which that was what Matt Gaetz' goals was. And so now that he wasn't relevant before Speaker McCarthy, the Speaker McCarthy opposing him has made him a credible candidate somehow, and allowed him to get all the attention that he was seeking beforehand. And he's going to continue to do this, even if it's the next speaker, because he has to seek that attention. I mean, remember what I said, Emma, this is retail politics. This has nothing to do with policy or principle anymore.
Well, just jumping in really quickly, those accusations I know you brought up earlier, just those are allegations. They were never proven. And again, that Congressman Gaetz has denied those.
I will say that you're 100% right. He's denied those,
right,
and it went away. But
right,
the other part, what I'm saying about the individual, those aren't allegations. That's firsthand that he told me that we dealt with on the floor. The first time I ever met this guy, he walked up to me, and Kristi Noem at the time was at the podium. He was speaker, or he was elected at the time. He was a member-elect. So we was going through conference and orientation, and he walked up to me as Kristi Noem, now Governor Kristi Noem, and he said, man, she's a fine, and you can put the B word in place there. And I looked at him, I said, really? Because Kristi is a very close friend of mine. And he turned around and walked away. Later, I will say he came up and apologized for that, but he still shouldn't have said it. It was completely out of line. And this is the type of individual Matt Gaetz is.
Clearly not a fan.
Clearly not a fan. Yeah, Matt Gaetz is a pretty disgusting person, isn't he? But, and I said this, I think, in a previous episode, he has got better at, presenting himself on the House floor. He is charismatic and eloquent, and tragically in politics that does go a long way.
Yeah, and he's also gotten married. I think that's kind of helped calm him down somewhat, I guess you could say. The first part of that, where he was talking about pictures, that's an old story about Gaetz, where he was very well known for, he liked to walk up to people in Congress and show naked pictures of women that he had slept with and brag about his conquests over the weekend. And this kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So Gaetz was already known for doing that. So Mullen confirmed that story and then added in the Kristi Noem story. So yeah, he's a real winner.
So weird. These people are so weird. Let's talk about another favorite weirdo of the GOP, and that is Jim Jordan. And, there is a very serious story that kind of underpins Jim Jordan's entire existence, and that is this sex abuse cover-up that happened while he was a coach, right? So just tell us about this before we play the clip of the kind of critique of him.
Yeah, so after Trump endorsed him for speaker, I did the story on the Midas Touch website about this, just refreshing what this is all about. So Jim Jordan, after he finished college and everything, he was a wrestling coach at Ohio State, assistant. He was the number 2 guy. He was assistant to the head coach for almost 20 years, all throughout the 80s and 90s, and before he got elected to Congress. And at that time, the team doctor, as well as other things, not just the team doctor, there was a culture. I think one of the wrestlers called it a cesspool of depravity around sexual harassment, touching, fondling of male wrestlers by other male wrestlers, by the team doctor, etc. Multiple wrestlers. There was 177 total that alleged that they were molested in some way. So Jim Jordan claims he knew none of this. So 177 wrestlers under his care were molested, and he said he didn't know about any of it. At least 6 of them have come forward publicly and said that they went to him and he covered it up or acted like he didn't want to know about it, et cetera, et cetera. Because if Jim Jordan had stepped in, he could have stopped it at any time. That's the point. But he didn't. He just let it continue to go on. So the clip you're going to see here is the fact that, and this happens a lot in these cases, people do not come forward, especially a situation like this where it's young men who are wrestlers, the macho. They don't want to admit that they were molested, right? So they keep it covered and hidden. And so when these guys finally all came forward, it was too late. The statute of limitations had passed to sue the school. The doctor had committed suicide. So what they were doing is they were begging the Ohio legislature to extend the statute of limitations to let them file suit. And so this is the captain of the wrestling team talking about the reason why this wasn't come forward earlier is because of Jim Jordan making us cover this up.
This is disgusting. You people have the power to do something. Ohio State is too arrogant. They think it's going to go away. Jim Jordan called me crying, groveling on the 4th of July, begging me to go against my brother. Begging me, crying for a half hour. That's the kind of cover-ups that's going on there. Now, you guys can sit and act like it's not going on, but I got a lot of other stuff here. Emails that were taken out of my mailbox. That's a crime.
The other thing I should say is that, I watch a lot of Jim Jordan because he, chairs committees and he's very outspoken, member of the House. And he really is a terrible person. The way he frames things, he gaslights, he lies. It's just so frustrating to see somebody who obviously has this past, won't engage in any communication or conversation whenever he's asked about this. He just shuts it all down. But he really is a terrible person.
One of the things that always bothers me the most about him is how he condescends to voters, to people.
Yeah.
He really, if you follow his Twitter account, as I do every day, or listen to him speak, he really talks to people as if they are have an IQ of 90 and are uneducated and don't know. I mean, and he talks about the fact that he has the hillbilly vote. He used that word, hillbilly. So he really, you could tell he really believes in his mind that that's what his constituents are. His constituents are uneducated. They're not very smart. They're easy to manipulate. And that's how he talks to them. And that's how he treats them. And in his heavily gerrymandered district through rural Ohio, he's able to get elected that way.
I mean, I think he probably has an IQ of 90, because I do think that this happens a lot, this kind of Dunning-Kruger syndrome, where you have all the confidence and you think you're an expert and you shout stuff really loud, but there's absolutely no depth or intellect behind the statements that you make. And I agree with you. He does completely talk down to people, but I just don't know that if I, got him in a room and just sat quietly and talked to him, I don't think he knows how to talk any other way.
No, I don't think. I'm going to say his IQ is 100, and he acts like, that's why he acts like he's smarter than the other people, because he thinks they're at 90.
He's got 10 points over his constituents.
He's like the guy who's like the assistant manager or the fry-later supervisor at McDonald's, and you're like the new employee, and he's like acting like he's so much smarter than you because he's worked there for 6 months and knows how to work the fryer. That's Jim Jordan.
But that's the job he should have had, right? That's the job he should have stuck with, not being the chair of committees,
Wrestling coach, right?
Indeed. Let's talk about I want to talk about Elon Musk and talk about this kind of misinformation, specifically about the war between Hamas and Israel. Because, this is obviously, let's just wind back a little bit, right? In my view, and most of the people that I've kind of interviewed and talked to, Elon Musk bought Twitter for $44 billion. It was a year ago now. It's not worth even a third or maybe a quarter of that right now. He bought it, in my view, to silence, the political discourse, to provide a kind of one-sided view of the world. And he has succeeded in that pretty much. He is a far-right, in my view, Russian operative. A lot of the stuff that he puts out there is very much aligned with what Vladimir Putin would like said. And I just think that this is more of the same, more of this shift to try and brainwash people through social media. We saw it in previous elections with Cambridge Analytica and everything else. Social media really is a way to manipulate the people, and he is doing that. Just tell me, I'll put it up on the screen, but just tell me about these posts that have been appearing, because, of course, he got rid of all of the monitoring. He fired hundreds of people whose job it was to sift through the misinformation and deal with complaints and inquiries. I mean, this is really bad, isn't it?
There's so many different theories on Musk out there, from all different sides, as far as what his motives are and what he's really trying to do. I try and keep up with all of them. They're all equally plausible. Yeah. I think it's really, really difficult to kind of say for sure what his agenda is. But I can run through a few of them. So basically, this is the account when we all woke up, what was it, Saturday morning, to the news that Hamas had done this. This was his post, which was, hey, everybody needs to follow this War Monitor account. They have really good, accurate information on what's going on in Israel. Then we look into this War Monitor account, and it's just a blatant anti-Semitic. It's got if you just search Jew or Jews on that page, you're going to find hundreds of anti-Semitic posts just like that one. And so there was this huge, obviously you've got Elon Musk now telling 159 million people all around the world to follow an anti-Semitic account for news on what's going on in Israel.
Yeah.
It's just outrageous what this is. And so, he gets this huge backlash. 6 hours later, he deletes that tweet, but the damage has already been done. And not only that, when he deletes this stuff, just as he did with Paul Pelosi, where he accused him of being, having the gay prostitute that was his assailant.
Yeah.
He just deleted it. He never apologized. He never said I was wrong, I was mistaken. No, he just quietly deletes it and goes on to the next.
Because he wants it out there, Ron. This is the thing. He knows that he's probably going to have to delete it, but he knows that in the few hours before he deletes it, that it's already ricocheting around the internet. And if you think that he's doing it intentionally, I mean, I think that part of it is intentional, but I also think part of it is he just thinks he knows everything and just sticks his fingers in so many different pies, and that half the time he goes off half-cocked and just believes stuff. I mean, I think that that's part of it. I also think there's an intentional element to it too, but he didn't go back on and say, don't follow these people, unfollow them. I found out who they really are. But is that not enough for you to know that he did it intentionally? The fact that he doesn't apologize, in my view,
yeah, you're probably right,
is the reason why he won't apologize. He is absolutely down for this, and this is why, and I keep saying it's in my opinion because it is. I'm not trying to state fact, but everything that he has done to me has a connection back to the Kremlin and the way the Kremlin operates. And if you haven't worked out yet about the war with Hamas and Hezbollah now wanting to kind of join, and Iran is behind Hezbollah, and who is funding Iran? It's Russia. And so a lot of these stories lead back to the Kremlin. And, this is what is so unfortunate, is that whilst it might look like a war happening over there, it's actual information warfare that is happening everywhere. A lot of scholars are even claiming that this destabilization of the Middle East is down to Donald Trump. And I'm actually working on a video for Midas Touch at the moment, which we haven't put out yet, which kind of explains this history of these kind of fake peace treaties that he created, the Abraham Accords.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look into them, they don't mention Palestine or the Palestinians or anything.
These between countries that were never in conflict with each other.
Never in conflict. Bahrain, and
UAE.
the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. It was a photo op. And because Donald Trump, who's on the far right, is really good friends or created a friendship with Benjamin Netanyahu, who's also on the far right, he invited him to be involved in these photo ops. And Donald Trump now is, of course, using his fake peace treaties to say, well, during my tenure, there was no conflict in the Middle East because I did the Abraham Accords. Of course, the architect of those was his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who walked away with $2 billion from Saudi Arabia. I mean, the whole thing stinks, Ron. It stinks.
He also said he should have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize for that. So, but to go back to Musk, because I think it's important, there's three different sort of camps here as far as what Musk is up to. So if you listen to Musk himself, this is what he would say. What he would say is the media has controlled, mainstream media has controlled the narrative, set the agenda. They're all biased. They're all left-wing. And I want to destroy that culture. I want to destroy mainstream media and have an open source platform with citizen journalists who post their stuff, whether it's accurate, not accurate, left, right, doesn't matter. Let the consumers sort through it and decide what they want to believe. That's what he claims he is doing. Okay. That's number one. Number two, the second theory is that he really did buy the platform to create a sort of Amazon on steroids, to get everybody's data, to get everybody's financial information, credit card information. And he wants to create this massive one-stop shopping thing, which will include AI, crypto, create maybe his own currency, his X currency. So he's talked about that as well. And that's another theory. And then the third theory is sort of along the lines of what you said, that he's basically just a right-wing op and just a chaos agent who's doing the bidding of foreign actors.
But if you listen to his interviews where, he talks candidly, it's difficult, isn't it? Because in order to be a genius, like a business genius, and then you could argue that Trump's very good at this branding. I mean, Elon Musk has basically conquered the space race. He's made electric cars mainstream. He's working on, solar energy. He's doing kind of brain implants. I mean, it's genius. But the reason that he's able to do these things is because he doesn't have an off switch. There's no kind of moral compass that goes, well, I don't know, or there's no self-doubt. And that's what pushes these types of evil genius is to be successful is that kind of total lack of self-doubt that keeps the rest of us, safe and at home. And so my fear is that if he was going to do those things that you said first, right, which is about creating a currency and turning it into an Amazon type thing, he would have done it before he ruined the platform, right? He has ruined the platform. People are leaving in droves. It's worth a third of what it was before. He would have done all that stuff first. I don't think he has the ability to do that. I don't actually think that. You got to remember, he didn't create Tesla. He bought Tesla. Tesla was an existing company.
Yeah.
SpaceX, these companies were all already existing. He hasn't had an original thought. And I think that's something to bear in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, listen, we have to take a break, but we're going to come back. And I want to talk about Donald Trump and his rallies and the Christian nationalist pastors who are blessing the rally before it happens, amongst other things. So there's lots to get through. We're back with Ron Filipkowski and more from Uncovered in just a moment. Did you know that your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics that makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Did you know that traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat? It can lead to acne, allergies, and stuffy noses. It's just gross. Miracle Made offers a whole line of self-cleaning, eco-friendly bedding such as sheets, pillowcases, and comforters that prevent 99% of bacteria and require 3 times less laundry. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/uncovered to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code UNCOVERED at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/uncovered and use the code UNCOVERED to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40%. Again, that's trymiracle.com/uncovered to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. It's 4:37 on the East Coast, and welcome to Uncovered. I'm Anthony Davis, and he's Ron Filipkowski. Let's just go to the Trump rallies for a moment, because, Trump really is in full electioneering mode. He thinks he's got this in the bag. He's praying that the timing of these court appearances, he's using the fact that he can't be in 2 places at any one time as a reason to try and delay his cases, but that hasn't really happened. Just tell us about that before we look at these rallies. Just tell us a little bit about the denies or the denial of these kind of delay tactics that he's been pushing.
Oh yeah, well, perfect example of that was this week when he, was supposed to be. So what was he supposed to be doing? What did he say he was going to do this week? He said he was going to be attending his trial in New York, his New York fraud trial, which is ongoing. He used that as an excuse why he couldn't show up in the Michael Cohen deposition. So he files a lawsuit against Cohen. First thing Cohen does is schedule Donald Trump for a deposition. Yep. Maybe Trump didn't count on that, but he did. And so he used that as an excuse to get out of attending the deposition. Then he skips out in the middle of his trial 3 days into it and leaves. Then Cohen runs back to the judge and says, he lied to you, judge. So then he's out doing a rally, when he's supposed to be the day of his deposition. So and then he was also supposed to be flying to DC to mediate the speaker thing. So he's constantly coming up with all these things that he's supposed to be doing, and then he cancels them or changes his mind. And so, yes, what he's doing is, and his lawyers are filing all these motions and all these cases to delay things as long as they possibly can. If the judge gives them a deadline of, midnight tomorrow, they wait until 11:59 to respond, because they're just doing everything that they can to drag their feet on all of this stuff, because really his plan is to win the election and be immune from prosecution and pardon himself. And so when he talks, it's funny when he talks a lot about this is absolutely the most important election in history. What he's saying is, for me, if I don't win this election, I'm going to prison. That's what basically what he's saying. But I think he could be going to jail before the election.
And the delay tactics is something that I've said when we've talked before about, because, you know, I keep reminding people that he could win. He still could win the election. And I think it would be foolish for people to think that because of all of these legal issues and because of not even polling, but just, you know, the insurrection or the theft of documents, you know, big stuff, he still is the leading GOP candidate and he still has a good chance of winning, you know. And if the vote goes Republican, then he's going to be the guy, whether he's in prison or not. And I think to take for granted that actually Joe Biden or another Democrat candidate has it in the bag would be foolish and naive at this stage. But he is desperate, right? And I think that desperate people do desperate things and desperate measures. And I think that any of his lawyers will be taking direction from him that they might disagree with. But these delay tactics, they could work.
And I've also had the belief, too, that there's going to be some things, and I've said this before on this show, there's going to be some things that are going to come out in these trials that none of us know about, that are going to really be damaging to Trump. And that's why I want these hearings to happen before the election, because I think the American people, when they hear some of this stuff, and Jack Smith hinted at this week in the documents case.
That's right.
Where he told
sharing the nuclear story.
Well, even more than that, he told the judge that he is prepared to prove something that we don't know, which is he is prepared to prove what Trump intended to do with these documents. He apparently has a witness or witnesses who have knowledge, or he has either emails, phone calls. He has something that he says will show what because we don't really know what Trump intended to do with this stuff. Was he using it as mementos to show off, to show people? But what Jack Smith has suggested is that no, there is a very sinister motive that Trump had to hang on to this stuff, and he is prepared to prove that in court. So if it's something like Trump in an email or a phone call or something threatening or offering to share these or sell these to some other entity or a foreign entity, it's game, set, and match for him, man. It's all over.
Yeah. And you know, I mentioned earlier about tracing this Hamas attack on Gaza as a leaders following those breadcrumbs back to Donald Trump. Well, the sharing of classified intelligence to Russian officials in the White House is the thing that I was mentioning, which is now coming under scrutiny amid this Hamas Islamist military, fight against Israel. It was May 2017. Former president defended his actions after he was found to have discussed sensitive details about an alleged Islamic State plot, ISIS, with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the other guy, the ambassador, in the Oval Office. There's those famous photographs of them, like laughing and joking. Trump said he had an absolute right to do so. And, I mean, this is now, again, because I was trying to explain how you can connect this current war with Russian intentions. Donald Trump has destabilized the entire Middle East, right? And former Soviet Union, Ukraine, with all of his actions. People would be foolish to think that because there was no military action whilst he was president, that he's a peacemaker. He is the opposite of a peacemaker.
But that's the easiest messaging in the world to demagogue for him, and that's what he's doing every day. Which is it's very simple. Yes, you and I, thinkers, can look through this and go, he set the stage for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. He set the stage for what is happening in Israel with what he did. And these things do take time. They don't happen overnight when you set things up. But his messaging is quite simple, which is hey, none of this happened when I was president. It's happening now. What does that tell you? Right. And that's a message that resonates with low information voters.
I mean, even, the Iran connection, because, of course, do you remember there was that classified document about a potential attack on Iran that, America was not considering, but it had to have a plan in place just in case. Well, of course, Iran is funding Hezbollah and funding Hamas. I mean, any of these things can be traced back to Donald Trump if you and I are not qualified to do so, but plenty of people in the coming weeks and months and years will do. And I, like you, am fascinated with what Jack Smith has up his sleeve.
The document that he is on tape talking about with his with Liz Harrington and his other person was about Iran.
Yeah, I know.
And
then he tried to say, oh, it was a newspaper, and then it turned out it wasn't a newspaper. I mean, it's like he is not, apart from eating classified documents or flushing documents down the toilet, he is not very good at destroying evidence, as we've seen from the photographs of the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago and on the stage at Mar-a-Lago and various other places. I mean, I, like you, think that Jack Smith, who, to all intents and purposes, is no fool. I mean, he has been on this at every stage. It's often the case that they are hanging on to the juiciest parts of the evidence that they have. He's hanging on to strike at the right moment.
Yep. And it's going to come out in the spring. Aileen Cannon is already signaling she's going to delay this for him. And I have no faith in her. But at least one of those trials, the one with Judge Chutkan, is coming up, in March, and she's not going to postpone that. And by the way, the hearing on that gag order is coming up on Monday with on that case as well.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the rallies, which he's still doing. And he does seem to have like a new lease of life. I don't know, maybe he's kind of drinking a new elixir or something, but, he is on it, because I actually watched a rally in full the other day, and he was on stage talking for over 3 hours, Ron. Over 3 hours of stand-up comedy without, taking a two-hand glass of water. I want to show what happened before Trump got on the stage. It was with this pastor, this Christian nationalist, who got up and setting the tone for the rise of Christian nationalism amongst Trump supporters, if they're not already there.
We pray that you will impart wisdom to our president as he goes forth to stand in our place. We ask that those who stand against him would be put to silence, that those horrendous actions against him and his family would be exposed and struck down. When we leave this place, give us the courage to say no to evil. Give us the victory over addictions and vices that harm us and our families, and give us the courage to stand with President Trump in the caucuses and in the election to come. We ask for your guidance, wisdom, and power in Jesus' almighty and all-powerful name. Amen.
They're trying to position him as the second coming, right? This is really how it is now. That in order, because the stakes are so high, as you said earlier about he needs to pardon himself or he needs the immunity of the presidency, they are going all out on let's just get this guy elected because, he is our savior. And let me just play the clip of the Trump supporter channeling God through Donald Trump.
President Trump works for God, and God is all about America, and God is the one that's going to save America, but actually he's using President Trump as one of his tools. So that's why we support President Trump, because he works for God.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I mean, this stuff is bonkers. It's bonkers, Ron. Yeah. And yet to them it's completely normal.
Those two clips were an hour apart, same place, I always, the Trump rallies all have the same format, which is first you start out with a local pastor from the area who gets up and gives the prayer. Then they have somebody else come up and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Then they have somebody sing the national anthem. Then they go into local officials, state officials, a headliner, and then Trump. So it's the same format every time.
And then Trump for 3 hours, Ron. I mean, that's
2 to 3 hours.
How long are people there for? 5 hours?
Oh no, much longer than that, because there are people who camp out overnight to get front row seats. There are people who camp out 2 or 3 days ahead of time in tents at the venues. So yeah, there's typically at least half the people who are going to be there are there 5 to 6 hours before the doors open in line. And then, yeah, so it's a whole day affair. It's a multi-day affair. So yeah, they're very fanatical. It's like the Grateful Dead, but a bad Grateful Dead, right? Yeah. So evil Grateful Dead. But I always watch the opening prayers because it's very interesting to me, the messaging that goes out in these prayers. And this is the messaging that Trump is the Messiah. Trump has been chosen by God, that the United States is besieged by these evil globalist forces and Satan is behind them. And Trump is the chosen one who's going to save us. So it's not politics. It's biblical. It's a Christian. This is why they say, well, Christian nationalism, what's so bad about it? This is what's so bad about it. And the idea that they could choose this man who's the most ungodly, the most unchristian person on the planet, and think that God is working through him. And it's also why I oppose people like Julie Green and other people, is I'm showing Michael Flynn, I'm showing that this is the Christian nationalist Trumpian, it's weaved throughout the whole MAGA movement.
And these are vulnerable people who have been radicalized, because it would be easy to say, oh, they're just dumb or they're stupid or they just have. It's not that. These are vulnerable people who are literally hanging their hat on him being their savior.
Yep.
They need better jobs. Or some jobs. They need something to do, and they think they've been brainwashed into thinking that he is their solution. And the tragedy is it's the opposite.
And when he says, only I can save you, only yes. I'm the only one who can do it. And they echo this. And this is part of the Messiah complex, which is he is the chosen one, just like Jesus. Only through me can you come to heaven is in the Bible, right? Yeah. That's what they're saying. Only through Trump can the U.S. be saved.
And Trump was interviewed the other day, and he said he was on the golf course, and a guy he said he's an okay golfer, who was saying, you're more famous than Jesus.
Yep.
And he was like, oh, I don't know about that, but yeah, he's kind of right. It's so weird the way Trump tells these fake stories about people that he's met, who it's clearly like something he's come up with, because I can see it the way when he talks, the kind of narcissistic aspect of this. He's trying to work out a narrative for getting to the point where he says he is more famous than Jesus.
Exactly.
Right.
In fact, you can see his first reaction when somebody asks a question like that is to recoil a little bit and to say, how dare you say that Jesus is more famous than
right.
me?
I mean, he is probably the most corrupt, compromised, and terrible person ever to walk the planet. And yet somehow he got elected president and he's running again. I mean, he is anybody that has the gall. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I still respect the fact that people care about Jesus, right? He doesn't. He does not care.
Not at all.
He wants to put himself at the very pinnacle of the planet. He thinks he is the creator.
There's been some of the more highly publicized incidents where, like, he was asked to name his famous Bible verse,
right,
and he mentioned 2 Corinthians, or when he talked
about, said it's too personal. He says it's very personal.
Too personal, yeah. One of my funniest ones was kind of a more obscure moment where he called into Pastors for Trump. He called into a Pastors for Trump event last year, and they said, well, we haven't done our opening prayer yet, so this was a different script. And they said, we would like to pray with you and do an opening prayer. Why don't you suggest your favorite prayer or your favorite, passage, and we'll say the prayer that you would like us to say.
Yes.
And Trump immediately was like, hello, are you there? I can't hear you. Like he acted like he lost like the connection.
The line had gone.
Yeah, the line. I can't. Are you still there? That was one of my favorite Trump clips.
So we're going to show a clip from the rally in Ohio where he basically, or Iowa? Was it Iowa?
Iowa.
Yeah, for some reason, he watches the television. He sees a clip of Joe Biden on the beach, right, where he takes the afternoon off, and he's sitting there, and Biden's slim and fit, and Buddy is 80, and Trump somehow manages to address this and claim that Biden has a terrible body, and it's a terrible marketing exercise to put your nude body out there, but Trump has a better body, but he wouldn't put it out there because no one deserves to see it. I'll let Donald Trump explain, but this I just couldn't even believe it was a thing. Here it is.
He's got a consultant somewhere. This is the worst consultant in politics that thinks he looks good in a bathing suit, right? No, he spends so much time at the beach. How do you do that? And, I have a much better body than him. But I'm not really sure that I want to expose it with the sun blaring down, the sand, the surf, the wind, it's not a pretty sight.
The whole conversation is not a pretty sight.
A lot of the MAGA people responded to that post of mine, saying that, he was just joking around. You don't take him seriously. He's not joking. Okay, first of all, he's not joking.
No.
He's trying to create this. He thinks that they think that he does have a great body because of the depictions that they have of him. Now, keep in mind, Trump has never once in his life appeared in public with his shirt off.
Yeah.
Never once appeared in public with a t-shirt on.
Thank the Lord.
Never, ever. In all of the most famous person in the world, public figure, 50 years, not once. And there's a reason.
Polo shirt, maybe, and often he wears like a undershirt as well.
Yeah, but he lives at a golf resort with a huge pool area, and he walks around the pool area, but he's never been in the pool because he's so insecure and vain, and he knows that he looks terrible without his shirt on.
And he wears a girdle, doesn't he? When you see him in a suit, wears a girdle, and he has lifts in his shoes, right?
Makeup. He's had 5 hair transplants.
Right, hence the crossover. Because you posted a video which I watched the other day of a plastic surgeon describing, because as a bald man, I'm very interested in this, and I'm sure you are too. But the surgeon described these surgeries that he's had, the flaps of skin to move follicles across, and this is why he has to do the bird's nest. It blew my mind, and I was like, this is not a well man. Someone who puts himself through this. And then that famous photograph of him where the wind's blowing and the bouffant goes up and you see this orange circle. I don't know.
Anthony,
I feel sorry for Melania.
That's why people follow me, though. And where else are you going to get a hair transplant surgeon outlining Trump's 30-year history of work on his hair?
But it was 20 minutes long, Ron, and I watched all of it.
It was. I only posted like a minute of it, but you're right. He did a whole thing on it.
Did a whole thing. Okay, let's talk about Mike Flynn, because this kind of just plays on with the Christian nationalism, doesn't it? And Mike Flynn is now associating himself with some of the weirdest people.
Yeah, well, Flynn's been doing this for a while. His version of Christianity is very strange and very dark. He grew up. His mom was way out there, very fanatical, very huge in the pro-life movement in the Northeast in Rhode Island.
Let's call it anti-abortion.
He would do missions overseas and all of that stuff.
Let's call it anti-abortion and not pro-life, because that's us just being part of their marketing exercise.
Sure. Yeah, very forced birth, let's say.
Right.
But she was very big in that movement, and he grew up, as a young boy, being brought to all these events by his mom, which were very way out there Christian events. So I don't think Flynn is particularly that devout, but I think that he pretends to, and he conflates his version of Christianity with a lot of weird stuff that's out there, QAnon type stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people have speculated. There's a few people on Twitter who say he is Q, and he has been Q for many years. I don't necessarily agree with that, but there's that theory out there where he's mixing in religion. So now he's hooked up with these these groups of these rappers, and they did like a "We Are the World" type song, where it's basically like a pro-Trump pro-Trump song, pro-MAGA song, and it's just very cringy.
Okay, and I would just caveat this before I show it, that my concern is that for as weird and cringy and all this stuff is, that Democrats don't seem to have an equivalent to this in terms of like the political marketing machine. And it's not that I want, Kamala Harris to be in a kind of pop group, but I do recognize that there are so many initiatives on the right to kind of bring around about the spreading of information, whether it be true or not. And that for me is kind of concerning. Tune. I didn't notice that before. The auto-tune on Mike Flynn's voice. Flynn. He sounds like Cher.
Flynn needed it. he's got the tenor going there. So, I mean, look, the Trump campaign and Trump understands that they have lost a lot of educated suburban voters, especially women, over the last 4 or 5 years. And those voters needed to be replaced in their coalition. And they believe that the key to that really is black voters, particularly black male voters and Latino voters. And so what you're seeing there is part of that. They're doing a lot of this stuff with rappers, musicians, UFCs, boxers, athletes, where they're really making a play for the black and Latino vote to replace a lot of the, white college educated voters that they've lost.
Yeah.
And this is part of it.
And, this word freedom is the one that frustrates me the most, especially as a kind of European now living in the US and kind of looking at this kind of landscape. And, America is a free country, and there is nothing that Democrats have ever done that takes away your freedom, ever. And yet the freedom word has been radicalized or weaponized, I should say, and used against people. And it's so sad because it is blatantly untrue. And you're actually less free in states like Florida than you are in Dem states like California.
Mostly what their argument is the COVID restrictions and the vaccine mandates and the mask mandates. Although that stuff was like 2 years old. I mean, but they're still going back to the well.
But there's going to be more pandemics. I mean, I heard Trump earlier saying that, they're trying to say that COVID is on the rise again. And the reason they're doing that is so that there can be more drop boxes for voting, and that they're trying to rig the election by claiming that COVID is on the rise. And it's like, wow,
conspiracy.
This is a serious conspiracy. And I actually think that they're all going to get behind that one and really kind of go pushing that. And because he claims that they're just trying to imprison him so he can't run. And that story, to the untrained eye, kind of looks accurate.
Yeah. And that's definitely out there. They talk about that all the time, that yes, they're going to, because the theory is that the 2020 election was stolen because of the COVID loosening up the rules on voting, allowing more mail-in voting, extending hours to spread people out. That's the reason why Trump lost. And so, yes, their theory is that Democrats are plotting to do that again.
And we should just remind people that the reason that the GOP don't want more people to vote is the more people that vote, the less chance they have of winning, because the country is actually a progressive country, that the majority of people in this country have more, even if they might not know it, they actually have more liberal leanings than the GOP would have you think. And in most other civilized countries, mail-in voting is normal, early voting is normal, proxy voting is normal, and also having polling places on every corner there should be. Not like in some states, Kentucky and other places, where you got to drive like 30 miles to get to a polling place. It's jokes.
Well, that's because the polls all show that election day voting favors Republicans. There's a reason why, because, if you restricted voting to one day, 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 or whatever, a lot of people who work hard jobs, work 9 to 5, working class people, younger people, are not going to do it. Yeah. Even if it's open for a couple hours after they get home from work, they got to feed the kids, they got to make dinner, they're tired. I just won't go. Yeah. So the harder you make, so what you're going to end up with is mostly retirees and old people if you just have a limited number of voting. And those people overwhelmingly favor Republicans. So that's why they want to restrict voting.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
And actually, there's a lot of call. It's happened in the UK, because in the UK, the polls close at 10 p.m. and it's not really late enough, because these days people work in all sorts of jobs, driving Uber, doing, multiple jobs to make a living. And so it's just not as convenient as it was in the Industrial Revolution when people worked 9 to 5. So there is a kind of push to do that. But what I was getting to is that to make it a public holiday, and this is something I really advocate for, the idea that voting day should be a public holiday and all businesses should just let their employees go vote and take the day off. And I mean, to me, that's just an obvious way to support democracy. And yet it's never going to get a look in this country.
Republicans will always oppose that. Yeah. And they'll use the excuse of, well, it's going to hurt business. It's going to hurt the economy.
Yeah. Sometimes I despair, Ron. I really do. And you were a member of that party. Shame on you. I mean,
that's why I know all this stuff.
I know. I mean, it's very helpful.
I know all the tricks.
You certainly do. Okay, tell us about Tommy Tuberville, because he's someone who kind of crops up a lot in this show, but he is actually responsible for. I mean, you could even connect him to kind of the military situations going on at the moment. Just explain about him kind of withholding votes and why he is, causing so many problems right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, the story that I just did was about him. That was about this. So Michael Hayden is the former national security advisor to the president and former CIA director. So Natalie Jacoby posted, it was just a random Twitter person. Should Tommy Tuberville be removed from his committee? She's talking about the Armed Services Committee because of his withholding the promotions. So Hayden jokes, well, how about removing him from the human race? And what Hayden has said after the fact was, what he was saying is, hey, I wish Tuberville had never been born, basically is what he's saying. But the way that was interpreted by Tuberville and by right-wingers was that was a death threat. And he's putting a target on him, saying, why doesn't somebody eliminate him from the human race? And from that, coming from a CIA director, makes it even more sinister, and of course sets the QAnon people on fire. So it was sort of like I was monitoring that all day as like right-wingers were absolutely going after Hayden. And then at the end of the day yesterday, I find out that Tuberville had filed a police report with the Capitol Police accusing him of committing a crime with that social media post that he was threatening a United States senator. So Hayden said he was just joking around. So apparently that's like a pending criminal investigation. So look, I've had people tweet 25 worse things about me every single day, So, I mean, the fact that he's such a snowflake and has such thin skin is laughable.
But there is a serious side to, what he's up to at the moment. Just tell us, why he is being a stick in the mud over these votes.
Yeah, well, his main issue is the Department of Defense policy, which says that if you are a member of the armed forces and you are stationed in a state, let's say Texas, where abortion is illegal, and you're a female soldier and you get pregnant and you want to have an abortion, that you will get the time off and your travel expenses will be paid if you have to leave to go to another state.
Yeah.
That's the policy that he objects to.
Yeah. But the problem now, because there's been a shift, and that is that Hamas have attacked Israel, a close American ally, which has triggered a deadly escalation in the Middle East conflict. And Tuberville is potentially slowing down what would be necessary. I mean, the U.S. is moving ships, moving carriers into the region. I mean,
we also don't have an ambassador to Israel confirmed.
Right.
Or many other diplomats in the region are being held up by him and Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. So yeah, it's a huge problem. And there, the Republicans' counter argument is, well, you can just put them up one at a time instead of, in other words, what he's able to block is doing them all in batches.
Yeah.
The problem is if you
there's 300 now. There's 300 of these military appointments.
That would literally be the only thing the Senate does for the next 6 months is do one at a time. We're going to do each promotion one at a time. Each ambassador, each diplomat. I mean, it's just crazy. You can't operate that way. So what happened was Schumer put through a handful, like 3 or 4 of the most critical, highest, like the commandant of the Marine Corps. Okay, we'll put through those, but we can't do hundreds of promotions that way.
I'm hoping that this conflict is actually going to kind of nudge Tuberville, or more people will put pressure on him. But, this is it's a serious problem. And the last thing, obviously, you want is for the U.S. military to get involved in this conflict. But, all European leaders and Joe Biden's made it absolutely clear whose side the U.S. is on and will be supporting Israel to the very end. Okay, let's finish with Mike Lindell, because, it's a sad story. And I've said this, I do feel sorry for Mike Lindell because he's an idiot. And he fell for the misinformation about the election, election denial. He basically spread misinformation about the election. And as a result of that, and these legal cases and fighting against voting machine companies and everything, this has now got to the point where he's used every last dime to pay legal fees, and he can't afford anything else. I'll just play the clip and we'll have a final chat about him.
All the lawyers we have for MyPillow and myself in the lawsuits with the lawfare with Dominion and Smartmatic, they just filed in federal court that to drop us as our attorneys, and this comes from the lawfare basically, and from the media, the attacks on MyPillow, what American Express did, just devastating our credit. And we have to. I can't pay the lawyers. We can't pay. There's no money left to pay them.
He's on the verge of tears. But what I thought when I saw this, Ron, is this is an example of what happens when you blindly follow Donald Trump, right? Yeah. You become collateral damage to this Trump brand lie, where anybody can say anything and claim it's true when it's not. And if Trump had just said, okay, I lost the election, kept his mouth shut, and run again 4 years later, he would have been in a much better position than he is now. But he got all these surrogates, Mike Lindell is one of them, and they created this whole thing. And now, unfortunately, I'm thinking about the employees of MyPillow, people that are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah, so there are some sympathetic aspects to the Lindell story, and I'm always sympathetic to to people, empathetic. And so you have a situation here where he's different. See, a lot of people like Steve Bannon, they know the election wasn't stolen. They're just charlatans. They're just putting out lies and knowingly. But the difference is Lindell absolutely believes everything he says. He's not a fraud. Like everything he says is a lie, but he believes the lie. He absolutely has bought in. He believes people in China tampered with the machines and flipped the votes and all of that. So there's that aspect of it. There's also the aspect of the Lindell Recovery Network, that he's helped thousands of addicts and he's paid all the bills for that out of his own pocket. He's got a Made in the USA company where he employs 3,500 people in a manufacturing jobs in Minnesota. And he apparently takes good care of his employees, or has. So there are certain aspects to Lindell that are endearing. And you also see that he's been completely taken advantage of by these MAGA grifters who have he's been duped. He's just
been scammed, basically. Yeah.
On the other hand, and this is the big darkness here, okay, is that Lindell financially props up so many of these people. So many of these people, these right-wing, really horrible people that have these podcasts and shows, their number one sponsor is Mike Lindell. And so when he goes away, when he is broke, which he is now, it's probably going to hurt a lot of them, and that's a good thing.
Okay. We have to finish, but it's been another fascinating episode. You can rewind as soon as we've finished and start again from the beginning if you'd like to. The audio podcast for Uncovered will drop later tonight. And don't forget to visit MidasTouch.com for all of the latest news. And Ron is the editor-in-chief. So if you want to see more of his work, find him there or on Twitter. I'm Anthony Davis. Catch us next Wednesday at the same time here on Uncovered.